بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأصلي وأسلم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's session, Cultivating Innovation and Growth Across Generation. We are delighted actually to have our distinguished speakers with us today who will share their thought and why fostering a spirit, innovation, and business growth is vital for long-term success of family businesses, with inspiring examples and practical insight from around the world. Before we begin, allow me to take just a minute to highlight the role of the National Center for Family Businesses. The center was established by royal decree to serve family businesses, supporting their development, growth, and sustainability. It provides a wide range of services, including specialized training program, strategic dialogues, and innovative initiatives such as Family Businesses ADR program, which offer tailored dispute resolution mechanism. Through this effort, the center works to empower family businesses and strengthen their continuity across generation. With that introduction, I am pleased to hand over the speakers who will guide us through today's session. This is yours, Hela.
Thank you so much, Abdulaziz, for that very generous introduction. We're really happy to be speaking with you with all of you today on a topic that's of great interest and a passion for all of us. Before we dive in, we will quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Hila Talati. I'm a partner with Generation Transition Advisors. We're a boutique firm, advisory firm working with families globally on topics around governance, transition planning, and succession. I started my career in management consulting and worked with a family business before coming to this space. And I'm based in Dubai, so very much in the region. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Hila. Good afternoon, everyone. We're delighted to be here. My name is Sam Brouhl. I'm a family business advisor, and I've been working in the field for about 15 years. I have quite a bit of experience working in the GCC, in particular in Saudi Arabia, where I've spent the better part of the past 10 years working with a number of family businesses. And we look forward to sharing our insights with you today.
Hello, everyone. Mariana Restrepo. I'm a recent graduate of Babson College, where I studied business administration and a concentration in economics, as well as strategy and consulting. Originally, I'm from Bogota, Colombia, where I am generation 3 of a family business in the agro industry, which is mainly where I've grown this interest for family business advisory. I joined Generation Transition Advisors as an associate in June, and it's been a great experience so far.
Thanks, Mariana. So we'll quickly walk you through the agenda. We will spend around, let's say, the next 35 minutes walking you through a few ideas from our side, and we'll make sure to keep 15-20 minutes at the end for questions. We'd love for this to be interactive, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. So we really look forward to the Q&A towards the end. So what are we going to cover in today's session? From our side, there's really 3 things that we thought could be insightful and valuable for all of you. First of all, we'll start by talking about why we think that entrepreneurship is actually such a critical and essential pillar for family businesses going forward. So we'll start there. Then we'll share a few case examples of different families that we know well and how they have embraced the idea of entrepreneurship and the kind of things they've done to build their business and generate new ideas in different ways. And then in the last section, we'll talk about, well, what could all of this mean for you? So what are ideas that you can take away in terms of embedding a more entrepreneurial mindset and approach in your family business? All right, so we'll dive into the first section. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of the 3-generation rule, but it is it's something that many family business advisors refer to and that gets talked about a lot in different family business courses, right? And it's the idea that by the time a family business reaches the 3rd generation, things tend to slow down, things tend to break apart, and often, the business either gets sold, exited, comes to an end, right? And it's a notion that's actually really common in many, many parts of the world. And so what you see on this page is the version that shows up in different countries. So in the US, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. In Brazil, rich father, noble son, poor grandson. I won't read out each one of them, but in China, from peasant shoes to peasant shoes in 3 generations, with the idea being that wealth never survives 3 generations, right? And I think embedded in it is the idea that people get rich, people get lazy, people stop innovating, and perhaps take things for granted, right? And this is just sort of a visual representation of what that could look like. So as you go from generation to generation, the health of the enterprise declines, the performance of the enterprise declines, and you're left with not very much at the end of the day. And there's many things that can end up happening. You end up selling the business, the family loses interest. I think what's very common is that the industry changes around you, and if you're not on top of it and not ready to change with it, that can impact a lot of family businesses. You may miss opportunities as a result. And of course, there are challenges and conflicts around succession and other areas of family conflict, right? That can all work towards diminishing and causing a family business to decline. I think in our view as GTA, this does not have to be the case, and families are not destined to end up like this. And so if we look at what might be a typical path, right, where you have first generation sort of creates a certain base and a foundation, second generation takes it forward, and then you have a decline. Our view is that there are families that are actually quite successful at getting past this challenge and actually taking the business a lot further. So as opposed to following this decline or something even worse in the case of conflict or mismanagement, there are many businesses that we've worked with around the world and that we've had the opportunity to know that have actually been really successful in saying, okay, with first generation took things up to a certain place. We as second generation, what are we going to do? What's our legacy? What are our ideas? How are we going to take things forward? And then each generation successively really looking at what they've inherited and saying, what is the legacy I'm going to leave for the next generation? And that's one way of getting out of this 3-generation trap, right? And there are, of course, many things that go into building that path of longevity. But in our experience, entrepreneurship is actually a really critical piece of it, right? And I think this wouldn't come as a surprise to many of you, given the pace at which the world is changing around us and how that keeps accelerating year after year. And so entrepreneurship is really critical to make sure that the business keeps growing so that it can keep pace with the family, even in the context of industries getting disrupted. It makes sure that you are thinking about what are the risks and the challenges of the business today. How do I protect it? How do I make sure it's sustainable? Entrepreneurship is also a great way of creating space for next generation interests so that family members don't feel that they're stuck doing the thing that their parents did in the way that their parents did it, but there's actually opportunities to do things a little bit differently while adding value to the family. And if done right, it can actually really strengthen family dynamics and stakeholder relationships, especially when you may have siblings or cousins or multi-generations actually working on new ideas together in a productive way. So we really believe that entrepreneurship is a critical pillar of building long-term success as a family business. So with that being said, I'll hand over to Sam, who will talk a little bit about, what that might look like in a family business.
Thanks, Hilla. So, how do you build on that long-term success? How do you get that bump from the third generation onwards? What we see is that in family systems, there are 5 mechanisms for embracing entrepreneurship. And there can be a close connection between those 5 mechanisms if the family has an innovation strategy and vision for what they'd like to achieve. And I'll go through each of these just to provide a little illustration of what we see. Hilla, can you go to the next slide? So the first one is business entrepreneurship, and we see this all the time. This is probably the most typical. Way that we see businesses look to grow and diversify. We see that through businesses that move into related businesses, building new brands, loyalty programs. Pay now, pay later has also been a popular one. We have several clients that in terms of new businesses, they focus on how can they be entrepreneurial, how can they continue to expand their portfolios. One family we worked with, they're in food manufacturing for the C and D markets, segments of the market, and they decided to go into casual dining. And initially their portfolio mix was probably 90% in food manufacturing, and today about a third of their business now is from the casual dining segment that they've been able to really grow successfully. I have another client that is in car washes. They're one of the leading car wash businesses in the U.S. And they established a loyalty program that essentially has a monthly membership. You can go get your car washed as much as you want every month, and that ended up growing their top line by 30% year over year. So it was an incredibly innovative way to drive revenue. Go to the next slide. The next thing we see is family entrepreneurship, and family entrepreneurship is similar to number one, but this is where a family member is leading a particular new business opportunity within the group. And this is something that we often see where the next generation is given the opportunity to take on a new venture opportunity, to test themselves, and to help support in building wealth and value for the group. And then the third one is corporate venture capital. And Hilla, if you can go to the next one. Corporate venture capital is an extension of the core business, and this is where businesses decide that they're going to invest in early stage ventures where maybe they see adjacencies. There's a family we work with that is in the parking garage business in the U.S., and they were introduced to a company called Metropolis, which is a parking application that has essentially reinvented the parking management landscape. And they thought that this was, quite innovative and something that could potentially really be leveraged within their own business in the future. And so they invested in that. And that ended up becoming one of the biggest parking application apps in the United States today. You go to the fourth one, family entrepreneurship. And, this is the space where family members have the opportunity to pursue entrepreneurial ventures independent of the business. But we often see a link between, family members who are entrepreneurial and those entrepreneurial ventures becoming opportunities for the business as well. A really prominent example that was that's in the public domain is the Moulier family, which is known for being one of the most entrepreneurial families probably in the world. And they had a family member who started a bread company. And the family decided that they would provide an equity investment in that, and ultimately scaled it to be one of the largest bread companies in Europe. And then the last one is venture capital investing. And I think this is one that we're really seeing as probably the thing that families are most excited about these days. And I think the reason for that is because they see venture capital investing as a way for families to pursue entrepreneurial activity together without necessarily having to invest in any one individual family member's venture opportunity, which can have some risks in terms of investing in new business ventures where there maybe they don't work out, things become personal, and conflicts can erupt. Venture capital is different in the sense that the family can align behind a shared vision for what they'd like to invest in together. They can pool their funds, and they can go invest in opportunities outside the core businesses together to build wealth and value for the portfolio.
So I move next.
You can go to the next one.
So I think with that in mind, we thought we'd walk you through a few examples of what the entrepreneurship journey has looked like in different families. This is an Asian family business, very much in retail. And when we look back at their journey, they've grown really in 3 phases. The first phase was really the founding phase. It was really sort of G1 building the business from the ground up. The founder, the patriarch, was very passionate about retail, and he started to create a stable of retail brands in many different categories, so clothing, footwear, electronics, home, etc., etc. And he built a portfolio of about 15 brands. He was very creative in terms of coming up with new ideas and taking risks. And when he started a new brand and he felt it wasn't working, he was also quite ruthless in shutting it down. So he moved on quickly from things that weren't working. What was also quite unique about this period of their growth was that he had a number of non-family CEOs for the different brands who he gave a lot of empowerment to run their business the way that they felt that they should, the way that they wanted to. He gave all of them sweat equity in their individual businesses, and he actually encouraged healthy, hopefully healthy all the time, competition between the different CEOs. And that led to really incredible double-digit growth pretty much continuously for about a 20-25 year period. Then they got to a phase where their core business, all the brands that they had created, had started to mature. There wasn't that much growth anymore. There was only so many stores that they could open while they moved online. It was about complementing what they were already doing, and it was giving another venue for their existing customers versus really growing the business. And G1 and G2 together, because G2 had by this point had entered the business and had also sort of learned the business from the ground up. I think they felt very much the need of, we have to keep growing. This business can't stay still and stagnant. And the way that they would keep abreast of the industries that they would love to travel. They would go visit retail formats in different parts of the world. They would look at trends. They would go to conferences. And I think based on all of that, over this 15-year period, they actually started 5 new businesses that they started outside of their core business. And it was in areas where they knew a little bit. So it was adjacent to their core business, but it was still something a little bit different, right? So they started an online-only platform. They went into groceries, which was different from what they had done in retail before. They started a logistics business, and so on. And it was really a partnership between G1 and G2 to build these businesses. And they worked together pretty well in terms of coming up with the concept and then hiring founding teams that they thought had the right expertise for these different businesses to build them and grow them. So then if we fast forward more to present times, we got to a point where actually the family started to think that we have most of our nest egg in retail and retail adjacent businesses. And, it's an industry that is volatile, that's changing very quickly around the world. And maybe we should be thinking about things that are much more sort of future-proof, high growth, sunrise industries, right? And so what they decided is that, look, when we've done retail and retail related businesses, we've built them from scratch ourselves because it's an area we know well. But to really learn new industries and to get a leg up and to move a little bit faster, they decided to go down the route of sort of VC and PE investing along the lines of what Sam talked about. And so they've gone through a process to define what are the areas and industries we want to invest in, how are we going to go about it, what is the kind of team we need, and that's in the process of being set up. We've gone now to this point where this is an initiative that's really being spearheaded by one of the G2, but with a very conscious recognition across the family that this is something that everybody needs to know enough about and have a shared vision and purpose around. So those are some of the things that really drove entrepreneurship in this family business, both the passion and the mindset within the family, and the way that they enabled the teams around them to really share in the success and build businesses alongside them. Sam?
Thank you, Hilla. And you may want to just build out the build on this particular column. So the second case example is a family that has used venture capital as a driver for wealth creation. And it's a family known as the Hickson family based in the US who have told their story in the public domain. So this is a family that really has a fascinating story and trajectory of how the business and the family has evolved from very early years. So the business was founded in the 1860s by the founder, Gideon Hickson. And he started the business focused in lumber and creating crates. And the lumber that they used to create those crates was quite unique in the sense that it was quite durable but lightweight. So it was really perfect for building crates to move things from one place to another. So that was the 1860s. And as that business began to grow, one of the things that really helped to accelerate that growth was the First World War and the Second World War, and the military contracts that they had to support with shipping military goods overseas. Now, in the 1940s, two gentlemen by the name of Edwin Booz and Carl Hamilton, they were two businessmen based in Chicago. They were in consulting, and they approached the family to invest in a new technology that they'd found and to create a business around it. And the technology was one where you could solder wires without having to use any other applications. It was basically self-soldering wires. And this was really revolutionary for the time. And again, it worked perfectly for military application. It was great out in the battlefield. You could repair tanks, you could repair other military equipment by using these self-soldering wires. So again, military contracts, this business just took off, and it was called Aircraft Marine Product. And the Hickson family was the first major investor in this particular business. So we move from the 1940s into the 1950s. Second World War comes to an end, and what the military usually does when these types of activities come to an end is they cancel their contracts. Well, and that's what happened here. But what happened was Edwin Booz and Carl Hamilton came back to the family and they said, listen, we've had a great run with this technology, and we think we can use it as a tool as in other applications that we see coming up in the future. And in particular, there was the advent of the computer motherboard. And they said, we think we can take this soldering technology and basically make a micro version of it, and we can use it to help solder the connectors within computers. And so the family said, wow, this sounds really, really interesting. Sounds like it has a lot of promise. And so they made another investment in the business. And ultimately, Aircraft Marine Products was rebranded. It became AMP, and it grew to become the largest technology company in the United States. By the 1990s, that whole segment of the electronic components industry was consolidating, and AMP was ultimately sold to Tyco for $11 billion. And the family took stock as their investment as a result of that sale and became major shareholders in Tyco. And from that investment, Tyco, was a very strong company, and over the course of 30 years, produced significant growth, significant dividends, and the family's wealth really grew substantially over that period of time. And they decided to diversify as a result of that into oil and gas, real estate, and venture capital. Those became their three additional business verticals. So they make it through the 1990s. Things are going really well. The family is extraordinarily wealthy. Everybody's living happy. And they hit their first major event that almost ripped the family apart and almost destroyed their wealth. In the early 2000s, you may recall Enron, which is a US-based energy business. There was a scandal there around accounting fraud, and the executives went to jail for a very long time. And it was right around that same time that the CEO of Tyco was found to be engaged in widespread accounting fraud with his own business. And ultimately, he was removed, arrested, and sentenced to a very long prison term. And when that event took place, the family saw the public stock went from $60 a share to $6 a share, literally over the course of 30 days. And the family saw billions of dollars of their own wealth erode overnight, more or less. It was a real crisis, but the family came back together. They looked at what they owned, and they decided that they were better together than they were on their own, and they decided to forge forward. And in the interim, the leaders of the business actually ended up suing, and they ended up winning all the money that they lost, that the family shareholders lost when they were selling under distress over those 30 days. So what ended up being a very scary story ended up having a quite happy ending. But the family reflected on this incredibly scary moment in their journey, and they said, you know, one of the reasons this happened is because we were living comfortably, and we were in some ways asleep at the wheel, and we can never let this happen again. And so they decided that one of the things that they were going to do was double down in terms of investment in development of their next generation. And at this point, they're moving into the 6th generation, to make sure that future shareholders understood business, understood investing, and were paying attention to what the family owned. And one of the things they do now is that they use the family's venture capital fund as a training platform for members of the next generation to come in, spend a year or two learning about business, learning about investing, developing those skills, and then they go out in the world and they have the opportunity to do their own entrepreneurial initiatives, or in some cases, join the family business and build their careers in that way. So that's the story of the Hickson family.
So now on to the CP Group and their story. The CP Group was founded in the 1920s by 2 Chinese brothers who immigrated to Thailand, and the group has substantially grown into different industries. They're now involved in the agro industry, in food, in retail, in telecommunications, in crop integration. The list goes on, as you can tell. And they had certain principles that shaped their strategy in being an entrepreneurial family, starting off with the way in which they approached family employment. As a first general rule, they didn't allow female family members to join the family business. And the second rule was that the next generation, whenever they joined the family business, they were allowed to join the smaller private companies to avoid putting the larger public companies at risk. And so this was a training ground for the next generation to really prove their ability to do a good job, to prove their potential. And if this was the case, they were then able to move on to work for a larger public business unit. So this was a really important way in which the family members were trained on how to take calculated risks, and for the senior generation to really be able to assess where their skills were and where these next generation family members could potentially fit in larger roles in the future. The family's vision for the organization was also to make employees feel like they were part of an extended family, where trust and loyalty really guided the workplace culture. So this can really be observed in the long tenures of the key company executives, which usually spanned across 40 years. And it really demonstrates their commitment to being able to dedicate their working lives to the CP Group. Another key element of the family's DNA was that innovation was at the forefront. And this dates back to the founding generation because they were quite pioneers in their approach, as they were the first to introduce tins as a means to package seeds to preserve them better. And this is an early example of how the CP Group truly put into action their belief that if you plant a seed today, tomorrow it will grow into a tree. So with this mindset, they've been able to show their next generation that with the right strategy, with the thoughtful risk-taking, new ventures can stand a greater chance of succeeding. And they've also been able to encourage entrepreneurship beyond just the core CP Group businesses. And this is evident in how they've been able to help propel the ideas of the third generation in launching other successful businesses that weren't necessarily related to their original businesses. The first one is the fact that they were able to support a third generation member in establishing the first international baccalaureate school in Bangkok. And the second one was the creation of a real estate development firm, which was done after this family member was trained with a joint venture company of the CP Group within the hotel industry. And they've also been able to do entrepreneurial initiatives within the core business, which includes the establishment of the Lotus supermarket stores in China, which prompted the entrance of hypermarket concept to China. And this was done by a third generation family member who had a very unique mindset which he called a go first, die first mentality. And it truly reflected his capacity to venture into uncharted territory. And the other example is how the family has demonstrated an approach towards circularity by actively searching and creating synergies across their business portfolio. And this is evident from their very start in the 1950s, when the company proudly served its customers, as they say, from farm to fork, selling products at every step of the supply chain. And this is an approach that has continued as more generations have joined the family business and have been successful at spotting synergies and new opportunities within their already existing ecosystem.
Thank you, Mariana. So the question then is, how can you embed this entrepreneurial culture within your family enterprise? And what we believe is that there are really two things you need to do. One is there needs to be consistency in the support in cultivating that entrepreneurial mindset across generations. It's also incredibly important to put the right enablers in place to make this happen. And so what we'll do now is we'll talk through what you can do to consciously support developing that entrepreneurial mindset, and what you can do to put those enablers in place to make that entrepreneurial culture take form within your family enterprise.
So
Mariana?
These are the four aspects that we've identified of how to consciously embed an entrepreneurial mindset within your family business. The first one consists of modeling hard work and values while staying open to change. And the main reason behind this is recognizing that starting a business is hard. It requires resilience. It requires the capacity to deal with uncertainty and not knowing how consumers will react, how the market will take your new product or service. So this is why it is very important to be willing to put in the level of effort and dedication that setting up a venture requires. But it is also important to to avoid becoming rigid within an original plan and stay open to any pivots that may come in the way. The second one is about cultivating a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. So a growth mindset consists of treating setbacks not necessarily as failures, but as opportunities to learn and to improve. So when you reflect on what worked, what didn't, you're able to gather valuable insights that can strengthen the future performance. And within a family business, this mindset can truly create a psychological safe environment where family members are able to experiment, to challenge assumptions, and to innovate, which can ultimately not only benefit just the family business, but also the family system. The third one is investing in learning and ownership, and it consists of developing the right skills and capabilities for family members in shaping their role as responsible future owners, as well as custodians of a family legacy. So this is an investment that can equip them with a greater understanding of the family business, and also earn the respect of key employees, of key stakeholders, that is grounded not just in their family name, but in their merit and the respect that they've earned. And the last one is supporting autonomy and resilience. So it's being able to teach family members to develop their own that can allow them to become more responsible over their own choices. And it can also help them foster independent thinking by encouraging family members to identify and actively pursue new business opportunities according to where their own interests or passions are, or where they encounter gaps in a market that they would like to meet those needs. And families can adopt these practices through establishing the right training grounds for family members to be able to test ideas, to gather lessons, and as well as learning from experimentation.
So the next piece, putting the right enablers in place to make this happen. The first one is it's really important to think about guardrails, and which are really what are you trying to achieve, and what aren't you willing to invest in. And when you think about what you're trying to achieve, what we see is there are typically two different paths that families consider when they're thinking about cultivating that entrepreneurial culture within their family. The first path is, what they're trying to achieve is development. So if you think about the case that we went through for the Hickson family, for them, cultivating entrepreneurship is about building the skills in the next generation to be able to be good investors, good business people, to be independent of the core business, to be able to create wealth of their own, and not completely reliant on what the family business is able to provide. Another path is, you're trying to build wealth and value for the family, and you're trying to cultivate those seed ventures within the family that ultimately could become bigger businesses in the future. And families can be very intentional about how they do that. In either case, it's really important to define, how you're going to do that, and what protections you want to put in place around those things in terms of expectations for the types of businesses you'll invest in, the types of support you're going to provide, and expectations around risk and returns, so on and so forth. The second big thing to think about is funding, and the question here is, how much money does the family want to set aside to support cultivating entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial activity within the family, and what is the risk tolerance that the family is willing to tolerate by using their own capital to fund these really experimental ventures that the family may embark on, and what needs to be put in place to support these ventures. So families take a wide variety of approaches to this from what we've seen. Some families will set aside a fund that has financial resources available to family members, and then they set criteria for how that fund can be accessed, how much funding each family member can receive to fund these business ventures. Other families take a less structured approach to this. They say that they will support entrepreneurial funding either through loans or through equity investments, but they put in place oftentimes a right of first refusal process where they'll say, we want to support entrepreneurial funding, but the first thing we want you to do as a family member with an entrepreneurial idea is to go to your individual branch to get that financial support, or to look to the outside. Once you prove that your business has some viability to it, then you can come to the family holding company and you can pitch your business plan and your idea, and the holding company would consider funding that venture. So those are kind of the two most typical ways that we see funding working in the families that we engage with. The last piece is around structures and people. And this is about, what are the structures and capabilities that you need to do this properly. And we believe this is also a very important piece, and sometimes it's more important than the funding. What we see families do when they take a structured approach is some will create a new venture board, and the board is a group of family, non-family members that come together to support family members with their entrepreneurial ventures. So the board may start with supporting a family member who just has a business idea, and they just need thought partners to help them think through that, and the board will help to guide through that process. And the board can also be used to assess those funding opportunities and to think about, whether or not this is something that the family would be willing to invest in. And the last thing is incentive structures. What are the incentives that are needed to achieve the objectives above? And that can come in the form of leaders in the family being very open with the next generation about what they would like, the fact that they would like to see the family invest in these things. They can put in place Shark Tank type entrepreneurial competitions within the family to push people to come up with entrepreneurial ideas. Those are the types of things that we see in terms of incentive structures with the families we work with. So what can go wrong and what do you want to do about it? We'll go to the first one. So what can go wrong? The first one is the goals and approach were not clearly designed, so we couldn't make the decision on the opportunity. And in this particular case, when you feel like there is an alignment on what you're trying to achieve, it's important to build clarity in terms of, what are the objectives? Are you trying to grow? Are you trying to diversify? Is this experimentation, learning? If you can think through that as a family, clarify your goals, you'll be much better positioned to be set up to be successful with your entrepreneurial endeavors. And the next one is the next generation was not involved and are not interested in taking forward fledgling ventures. So this is something we see quite often, where a family may talk about needing to cultivate that entrepreneurial spirit, and they're concerned that the next generation doesn't have the fire in the belly, that same entrepreneurial grit that they saw in previous generations. And they want to try to figure out, how do we recreate that within the family? In our experience, it starts with, having honest conversations between the senior and next generation around, what is and what is not working well with regard to entrepreneurship, and to not be afraid to go back to the drawing board. But I think in general, part of the hesitation we see from the next generation when it comes to entrepreneurship is the fear of failure. And if families can have open dialogue about the need to have an entrepreneurial culture and to encourage the next generation to take risks, and that it's okay to fail, it's one way that you can kind of move towards overcoming this particular barrier. The next one is the senior generation is risk averse and doesn't want to take attention away from the core business. And when you see that perspective, there are a few things you can think about. First, help the senior generation understand the importance of growth and diversification, and consider establishing a separate team to work on new ideas. This is something that we often use as a way to actually support the senior generation in moving into new roles as we work on succession planning. Oftentimes, the senior generation that's actually very entrepreneurial. They're very focused on their core business. They sometimes can get in the way of next generation leaders. And so if you can create a separate group that can focus on business development opportunities beyond the core, it could be a great way to actually get the senior generation involved in being entrepreneurial and looking at new opportunities while the next generation of leaders are pushing forward with the core business. Next one. The next one is the next generation, has the entrepreneurial drive, but is afraid of taking funding from the family. And this one is something we also see, like there are a number of families we've worked with where they've established entrepreneurial support policies in their family constitutions, and they'll come back to us and they'll say, we created this policy, but it's never been used. And that we're really disappointed in that. We think it would be, great for members of the next generation to take advantage of the fact that we're extending this olive branch to be entrepreneurial. And what we find is that oftentimes it's not so much about the money. The next generation, while they want to be entrepreneurial and they may want support, they don't need the financial resources, but what they would really value is the network and other non-financial resources that the family enterprise can provide. And that can range from everything from, legal services to labs to innovation space, so on and so forth. And so what we've increasingly seen is that if we can help families think about, what types of resources can the enterprise provide to support entrepreneurial activity beyond the money, that can really break down the barriers and open the doors to the next generation being more open to pursuing entrepreneurial endeavors. And then the last one is the family has funded certain next generation initiatives, but now feels stuck and doesn't know how to pull the plug. So in this particular situation, we find it helpful to considering requiring family members to raise external money as well to support those objectives. So, if the family feels like they're the only ones who have skin in the game, and maybe they want to, for the second, third rounds of funding for some of these businesses, they don't necessarily want to be the only ones contributing. It's time to have that conversation about starting to look for other resources to fund those opportunities. And that takes us to the end. So questions and answers.
Thank you so much for the great session that we had today. Thank you all. Thanks to the esteemed speaker for their valuable contribution, and to the all for your presence and get engaged with us today. The session highlights the importance of the innovation and the growth of family businesses, enterprises, the role it plays in ensuring long-term sustainability. Thank you so much. I believe that there are some or a few questions, if you allow me to ask them before we close the session. First one says here that, can you please explain the practical relationship between zones number 2 and 3? I'm not sure which slide he emphasized.
I think it was, I'm guessing it was this slide.
Yeah.
And he continues that, how do internal idea from the family or businesses evolve into effective external investment? Great
question. So the link between 2 and 3 is probably not too different from the link between 1 and 3. So 2 really just highlights the fact that a family member has been assigned or has volunteered to take on an entrepreneurial project for the business. So that could be, looking at a new brand. It could be looking at taking on a new smaller business venture as part of a subsidiary for the group. And the link between 2 and 3 would be that maybe that the business has started by looking at a corporate VC investment opportunity. That investment opportunity has proven to be successful, and the family has decided to buy that business and bring it into the portfolio, and a family member has been tasked has been assigned to lead that business as a new part of the group. What was the second part of the question?
I think you covered it. How do internal ideas from the family or business evolve into effective external investments? Although I think in the example you gave, it was the other way around, of 3 sort of leading to 2.
Hilla, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I would say in general, I think 2 and 3 are distinct. So you could do one, you could do both. Hopefully you're not doing neither. And so, there may be examples in families where a family project led to ideas of investing in something external, but it doesn't have to be, it's not a sequential path. It doesn't have to be the case. So, there might be a time when family member tried to build something within the business, but then saw opportunities outside where there were companies that were much bigger and able to do it at a different scale, where perhaps they decided instead to partner with an outside company and invest in them. So that could be an example of going from 2 to 3. But in general, I think the idea is that these are not necessarily linked with each other, but what we're trying to showcase with this slide and with this illustration is that entrepreneurship can take so many different forms. And it should link a little bit with what are you as a family really trying to achieve, right? Because that will determine what do you do and how do you do it and who's leading it.
Perfect. Thanks so much for the answer. Also, there's for me, a question that I liked most, which says that what was the biggest challenge during the transition from G1 to G2 leadership?
I saw that question. I have a feeling it was with the first example. Abdulaziz, did you notice when the question came in?
Honestly, I have no idea which one, but because there are many slides, but I assume that when there was a chart that shows 4 different views regarding to this.
What was the biggest challenge from G1 to G2 leadership? It's a great question. And I would say that the G1 to G2 transition is still very much underway. So maybe in a couple of years, you have to ask me if anything went really wrong. I think at the moment, it is fairly straightforward. I think the questions and the challenges really are around the size of the portfolio. G1 worked very, very hard in a very, very hands-on way. And I think sometimes G2 looks at G1 and says, there's a lot I want to do, but I don't want to do it like that, right? And that can sometimes lead to some frictions and sometimes some fear of taking on certain roles because not that they don't have a passion for it or a desire for it, but the fear of not wanting to do it the way it was done by the senior generation, perhaps at times, and feeling they may not have the inclination to do it or the ability to do it that way. So I think those are some of let's say the pieces of the process that the family has been working through. I hope that helped. And whoever asked the question, if you have a follow-up on that, please do chime in.
Great. Thank you so much again. And we still have 3 more minutes. I'm not sure if you guys would like to add a few words or to conclude the session with the advice or the way of thinking that audience might take.
Actually, Abdulaziz, I noticed there was one more question.
Perfect.
Second one. I'm not sure.
I assume that the Shah, I believe Shah Al-Afra, I guess. Do you think that her first question is similar to the second, or we can?
Yeah, I think they are quite similar.
It says that in the slide you show different forms of internal and external entrepreneurial activities. Could you elaborate more how family-owned auto leadership can practically balance between corporate entrepreneurship and external investment without losing focus on their core operations?
Yeah, I guess it is a slightly different question from point 1, from the first question. And I think we addressed this in part later in the presentation, but I would say it's a really valid point. It's something many families worry about. And sometimes there can be, with the next generation, a desire to go after shiny new objects, right? But while it is still the core business that is generating wealth and generating profits and keeping the the family engine going. And it does require balance, right? There's no obvious answers, but the reality is that one of the beauties of being in a family business that's past the first generation is you have multiple family members, and it's about thinking about roles and, who has an appetite and who has entrepreneurial spark that might be better suited to look at some of the new things, while, who are the kind of leaders who will be better suited to running the core engine, right? So I think that's one of the ways you can think about balancing. And obviously, capital is something that needs to be thought about as well. How much am I willing to risk, put in one place versus the other? But these are all things I think families need to really work through together in the light of the objectives they're trying to meet.
Thank you so much. I would like also to extend my sincere appreciation for you, Hilla, Samuel, and Marina, for your contribution, for the time that you spent with us today. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to welcoming you in our upcoming session. Before we conclude, we ask you kindly that you share your feedback by scanning the evaluation QR that you're gonna see after you close the session. And I need to also let you know, guys, that this session will be published via YouTube, and inshallah there is gonna be a paper after that written in Arabic regarding to what we've or the speaker, the distinguished speaker, have shown us today. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Abdulaziz. We hope you guys found this insightful, useful. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us with any further questions.
It was indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.